Dearest gentle listeners, you are listening to the Ladies Bridgerton, the talk of the town. We are your effervescent hosts, your neighbourhood-friendly Kiwi, Tash from Middle-earth, New Zealand.
And Patty, Regency romance enthusiast, whose current chapter of her story takes place in Ohio.
Settle down onto your favourite settee as we dive into the lives of the elite and illustrious ladies, lords, and royalty of the ton. This Bridgerton podcast is two friends talking romance, symbolism, Easter eggs, and deep diving into the connections of our favourite characters. This podcast covers both book and TV series and therefore will contain spoilers.
Today, dear listeners, we finish up our episode 2 side stories. We're going to talk Mondrick. I can never say that with the S.
Mondrick.
Mondricks or Mondriches.
Mondrick.
The Featherington femme fatales or femme fatalities. You decide. And some other loose ends before we get to move on to episode 3. We won't rush through though, listeners. We promise.
We never have. Once again, for the probably 4th week in a row, unfortunately, I am still sick, so deep apologies for any coughing fits, wheezing, and or death you may experience. Now we must make haste into today's episode. Well, we are starting out, scroll, with the Mondrick, or as I like to say, the Mondrick family, so I don't have to try put all those
The Mondrick family.
Mondrick family. And interestingly, as I was watching it through last night, so we start out and it is Alice getting undressed by her maids, followed by Will coming in. And we'll go back and backtrack to the conversation they have, but it ends on them starting to get a little bit steamy, and then it cuts to Penelope writing her Lady Whistledown article. But they did say that there is a full sex scene, because when they were talking about in the interviews for the season, they had a full-on sex scene filmed that they said, well, they might put it into a future season. But I actually think that it's an extension of this moment that cuts off, because you can tell that it kept filming.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they did, but I'm not going to think of her name right now, but the actress who plays Alice, when she posted, she said that one dress was the dress she was wearing in the scene that got taken off or whatever in there, that there's a scene where and they are wearing those outfits walking around the park when
but
the Featherington sisters decide to host their ball, but they're way in the background and it was not noticeable. I just happened to catch it after I saw her post that. I'm like, that dress looks familiar to me, and I found it.
Emma Naomi.
I'm sorry?
Emma Naomi.
Okay, thank you. So, but we also know, and I've been watching, because there needs to be a 12-step, because as much as I am not watching the actual episodes of season 3 so that I could get some fresh eyes as we do a rewatch to do the podcast and kind of catch new things, which I did last night. I was pretty excited. I have been watching the press tour documentaries that M Edits on YouTube did, and not one interview red carpet thing, but 2 do Nicola and Luke both say, like, everybody gets busy.
Yes, yeah.
Everybody gets busy in this season, and we ended up not having everybody get busy.
No, so I think the ones who got cut out is I think they cut out, I think the sisters both had extended sex scenes, but we only got it cut down to those few seconds, which I was which I was okay with. I think we all
what we got of the both of them told enough of the story.
Yeah,
for them. Yeah. Yes.
I think that the episode 8, the finishing sex scene, I think that one would have potentially been a little bit
longer. Should have been longer.
We're not bitter at all.
Size matters.
Have you seen on the main Bridgerton page, D. Gilbert, somewhat
Colin Bridgerton position? Did you see the remake? Because people were like, "That's not how he was." So she put the blue blanket on it.
She put the blue blanket.
That was hilarious because everybody's complaining.
Stephen comes home and he goes, "Why do we have a new blue blanket, Tash?" And I'm like.
Well, and what's funny is I didn't watch the whole press tour like from start to finish. I think I picked up somewhere in March, but I know I missed some of the early ones. And
Me too.
there's an interview they did that they had to give a spoiler that was non-contextual. And the
Yeah.
guy's like, give me a non-context spoiler. And she just goes, blue. And
Oh,
like after watching the show, I'm like,
it's not
like,
silk, it's
got it.
velvet. I think it's velvet. Looks like velvet.
No, it's definitely not velvet.
Well,
It's shiny.
It's shiny.
Velvet is not shiny. But I love the
Velvet is.
and here we are not talking
Oh.
about the episode we're supposed to be, but I love the audio description. Has to say it's peacock blue.
Yeah. Let's Google blue blanket Bridgerton.
What is the material?
This why you're not even giving me the blanket. Come on, Google. You know what I want.
But well, and the thing with the picture, like what people were complaining about that I saw was the fact that they showed Colin's feet up on the end, like he's hiking himself up on the arm of a sofa. And he wasn't doing that because he's definitely on his knees. Come on now, artist. But her adding the blue blanket was hilarious.
Doesn't look like silk at all to me. It looks like a kind of velvety because it's got those folds where you know when velvet goes in a certain direction that it goes into a different kind of tone the way that the light hits it. It's got kind of those layers where it changes color between that green and that blue.
I personally think they're not going to use silk. I think they hoped it would look like silk. Yeah.
I think it's kind of like a velvet or like a fake kind of velvet. What's that material that's the like
all I
velvet
know is we know that
that's...
Colin is a little neurodivergent and he uses this blankie when he's sleeping on the settee. So we know it's soft. We know it's warm and cozy and
velour.
it smells of their love together because he's cuddling under it when mad and still wants to feel close.
Comfort blanket.
Yeah, like my son's
like
most comfortable blanket is one of those like velour, like silky. I call it the silky blanket. It's not silk, but it's just so soft.
Yeah.
They sell them every year at Christmas. Buy them for your sensory issue people. It will be cut. Like I literally every year have to find a red. It has to be red. A red one of these blankets. Almost every year I have to replace it. It's got to be the same blanket. He will not. I've tried buying other blankets. I tried getting that. And it's like they just took one of those blankets and they sewed yellow fringe around it because it's got that fringy edge or whatever.
Yeah. That was one heck of a tangent. Let's get back to Will and Alice.
Yeah. So, speaking of Will and Alice, everything Alice says in this conversation is how Colin feels. Side stories play into the plot. So, anyways, the actual conversation that occurs in this scene in episode 2 is Will comes in and he says they don't have to follow the rules. Like he's following Benedict's advice and like, hey, don't worry about it so much. You guys are married. All of these rules don't apply to you. But Alice is still very reticent. She's like, but Miss Connor said that's not how it's done. And
I think she's also afraid, like, even though they are now higher in standing than the servants, and I think they were always higher in standing than the servants, technically speaking, but I think they're afraid of even misstepping in front of the servants because servants talk and they know that they haven't earned their place yet or earned any loyalty with those servants. So the servants could go to other people and say, oh, my mistress is sleeping in bed with her husband. How scandalous is that?
Well, and I think we have, I saw a TikTok, and no offense, TikTokers, I'm never going to remember your name.
No.
But it was a good one. I might have shared it in Tangent Queens. I don't know. But somebody said how we have way more insight into various servants this season.
Yes.
We have Miss Kana playing a role, but she kind of plays a role like the housekeeper from season 1, where she, is introducing them to how things work there.
Yeah.
Just like with Daphne.
If it doesn't serve the purpose, they're not going to put it in.
But Ray's not just the lady's maid. She's Pen's ride or die. I mean, you can, like, they're pointing out facial expressions she's made, like when they're walking in the park after she's been hidden away after her big embarrassment, and people walk by and like you heard them. It's in the subtitles if you have the subtitles on, where they're talking about Pen, like she's right there, and Ray's just like side eyes them, like she would scrap for Pen, swear. And so she's like her ride or die. And I think that's going to be important because, I mean, people are like, Andy Serkis was asked where his wife was at a function And he goes, she's recording this little show called Bridgerton. So everybody's like, well, Varley's there. So that means Pollen's home. And I was like, no, Varley is Portia's.
Yeah.
Ray is Pen and Colin's housekeeper. Yeah. I think that's going to start the housekeeper wars, kind of. I think there's going to be a little scrabble dabble do between Ray and Varley about still is because Portia's not moving to a dowager house.
No, never.
She's going to stay right the hell there.
Well, I mean, and to quote episode 3, Portia is saying, if you marry Debling and he's away, think of all the power you will have. And then she goes to try and like
us.
No, think of all the power and I'm like, I love how you're trying to make it out like, oh, the whole household, when all you really mean is me.
She does the same thing when they're walking in the park, and she's like, and now that this whole Cressida business is Whistledown business is over, everybody can focus again on our nuptials.
Yeah, on
excuse me, and then she corrects herself there and says, I want all eyes on you.
Yeah.
I'm like, nice save, narcissistic mama.
I think she clocks when she is going 1000% narc, and she's like, oh, let me rate it into just 100%.
Yeah, she's got that. That one that one TikTok guy who always goes, knocks be knocking.
Yeah. But
knocks be knocking.
your real face is showing. Quick hide.
Yeah. And she's like, Colin could pop out of anywhere. I need to always be talking nice to my daughter.
Yeah.
And I don't want a dressing down from Colin Bridgerton again.
Honestly, because we will very shortly get into, and that's going to be a big part of this episode. So I'll save this thought for when we get up to that part.
Yeah.
So Will and Alice, they...
Well, so I want to read the part that I was paused on.
Yeah.
Because that side stories play into the main story.
Yes.
So she says, I'm somehow afraid I will do something wrong and they will take it all away. We've made use of our advantages, but everything up until now we have worked for. And I cannot stop thinking, what have we done to earn this? And they're talking about their new status, their new wealth. But if you take that very thought process and put it onto Colin, it helps you understand a big part of his journey in the second half, because he did nothing to earn Penelope. Yeah. Nothing. And we know, like, he has white knight syndrome. He wants to earn it. He wants to save her. He wants to, like, he saved her whole family at the end of season 2. Like, that was a big deal to him. Like, he wants to, and he, in his mind, he saved her from a non-loving marriage in episode 4. Like, he wants to save her, but when it's hard for him, like, when he finds out she's just loved him since the day they met. I mean, really, I feel more now in that "what good am I to you" line when you put this and realize that what she's saying about their newfound status is how Colin feels about Penelope. Penelope didn't have to do anything special. He just literally technically fell off a horse. Like, that's all. That's all he did. In fact, it was probably one of the worst moments. You know what I mean? Like, that clumsy, klutzy, granted her hat caused it, but whatever. Like, in the book, he basically says he had bad form. Like, he puts the blame on himself for falling off the horse. So it's a moment that most people would find it embarrassing. Colin just laughs it off. If you've not read the book, he just laughs it off in the book. And in an embarrassing moment with your butt in the mud, this girl falls in love with you. Like, you literally didn't do anything heroic. You were not manly. You did not carry a sofa upstairs for her. Like, you didn't save her family. She just loved you anyway. Like, he's really struggling with that because with everyone else in his life, he's had to earn it.
Because what was the line? It was like, on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday morning or Friday morning.
Monday. She met him on a Monday.
Monday morning, Penelope Featherington. But this whole feeling that Colin has, even though about the Mondricks, it's all kind of tied in. Actually, upon watching Anne E again last night, you know whose story this is like?
As you should.
Yeah. Honestly, it's a really beautiful tale. And
Pollen fans, if you have not discovered Anne and Gilbert yet,
Gilbert is so Colin coded, except like Gilbert somehow, even though he's a child when it starts out, he makes Colin look like a slum dog. Like, Gilbert is
kind.
Gilbert is perfection.
Yes.
Like, he is just...
Gilbert was my first fictional boyfriend.
I can see why. He should be everyone's. Like, if you're going to have a first crush, let it be Gilbert Blythe. Like, he is a beautiful
And talking about being empathetic, like, I I cry at the deaths of celebrities. And when the not this Gilbert, the Gilbert from the
Original.
Sullivan,
yeah,
from the miniseries from 1985, or in the 80s, I think it was 1985,
which was called Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Avonlea. Those two are the best. They did do sequels after that. They did and the continuing story, which was okay. Didn't follow the books at all. Okay. I'm not new to film adaptations not following the books. Okay, I am not new to this rodeo.
Harry Potter fans, the first two, we feel you.
And what is it with the third installment? What is it with the third installment? Goes to the books.
Yeah.
And then the third installment's like, you went off the freaking rails. What? Yeah. Anyways, that's Jonathan. Jonathan Crombie.
I will never forgive
is my Gilbert
making Ginny tie his shoelaces and then their first kiss. What was that? What was that? That's you know just... what? Oh my god, they pulled a Jess Brownell on Ginny. They took her from being a strong, independent, ambitious, crazy, fiery little redhead to being this meek side background character that always needs saving. And I'm like, no. We stand in independent. Jess Brownell and him, they need to just swap. Meet in the middle, people. Meet in the middle. You can have a strong male and a strong female. It doesn't have to be exclusive one way or another. But it wasn't.
I want a power couple, and Pollen was supposed to be the power couple.
No.
Ginny and
Anthony and Kate 100%. Anthony and Kate 100% the power couple. But it wasn't Gilbert Blythe that made me think of Colin.
Power.
It wasn't Gilbert Blythe.
That's power. I'm talking, huh?
It wasn't Gilbert Blythe that made me think of Colin. You know who it makes me think of? William Barry and the gold. He says, I just want, and keep in mind, William Barry is in a long, long line of wealth. He is
the Barrys.
He is the top dog in his household. He is the top dog in their little towns, their little society. He comes from a long line of wealth. And yet he still has the exact same kind of storyline as Colin of, I wanted to do something for myself. I wanted to make my own name. I didn't want to come from a name. I wanted to make my own name. I wanted to do something that mattered. And in that whole Gold of Avonlea storyline was all about him wanting to forge his own path, not his family's. And it just really was very Colin coded of.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of like that in the original books. The gold thing is not, that's a made up storyline for Anne with an E. But Mr. Barry moved out into the Prince Edward Island is kind of like the coastal country town. And he wanted small town, but his wife, he wanted to separate himself from the family and do things on his own, kind of just be known for who he is and himself. And
but he was also miserable when he was trying to do it on his own without his wife. And then the second that he acknowledges her and they start acting as a team, oh, would you look at that? Happiness can be achieved, Colin.
Well, in the original one, his wife wanted the status so bad. It would have been like if Colin married Cressida.
Yeah.
She wanted the status and she looked down her nose at people. And in the Sullivan one, she was like she didn't let Anne and Diana be friends for a long time.
Yeah.
And Anne had to earn it. Yeah. She had to earn it. She had to save Minnie May's life from the croup. That's the only way that Diana and Anne got to be friends again.
Could Anne come take care of me, please?
Yeah, Anne, where are you?
Where's
the plaster?
Croup has been kicking my blood. I need someone to put some onions in my shoes for me.
I told you, you need some syrup of ipecac and you need a mustard plaster.
Okay, let's back to the gravy boats, hilarious. People. Back to the gravy boats. And speaking of gravy boats, let's talk about sex.
Yeah.
So after our lovely Portia, Mama Portia, in detail described the subtleties of pleasure, the two sisters steal away from the night with their husband to try and experience such simple pleasures. This time, thanking the poor servant, thanking the Lord that they no longer have to clean any bridges. This time, puts herself into the position.
First of all, servants talk. So how has Varley in the
I can't believe it didn't
gossip
get back to Barley.
train, right? That's what I'm like. How did Varley should have been coming in, like, kind of like, she's the, talking about Penelope and Colin, like, how was I to know it was a love match? Or like with Marina, like, hey, look at these sheep, nothing on them. Like she finds out everything. How did she not find out from the servants' email internet system, whatever they had back there?
Well,
Servants just talk.
I mean, yeah, I'm like trying to like justify it that maybe they thought he was doing the pull-out method, but why would it be in his pants? Like,
but it also shows you that Philippa and Prudence's servants, that's why they wanted to decide if, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about how this plays in, because we know season 4 is all about like the servants' wars or whatever.
yeah.
And Colin and Penelope have the little Lord Featherington, and they're taking over Featherington House. And we've already said, right, is Prudence and Philippa were already talking about one wanting to keep Varley and one wanting to get rid of Varley. And now we have Ray, the ride or die.
I don't think that either Prudence or Philippa could afford Varley without a title.
But if they would have had the boy, they would have had the funds. They would have had the title, and they would have had Portia's inheritance, because that went into the estate, because she's not allowed to hold money.
Yeah.
So
it'll be interesting how it plays out. But I want to talk about the different reactions. So first off, we see Philippa. No, Prudence. First off, we see Prudence. We see Prudence first, and we've got Mr. Dankworth on top. He seems like he's having a good time. I love how he goes to go stroke her cheek, and she slaps it away. Back off.
Right. Like,
that is too intimate. And you can enter me.
Well, and the thing is,
you may not stroke my face.
Yeah. As you watch their relationship, like the balloon scene, I was watching that again, and like they have sexual innuendo.
Yeah, that was
walking in, foreplay. And she's like, "Oh, that's humongous," and he goes, "Yeah, now that you're better, it's
ready to fly
at any moment."
Yeah,
and then pulling her behind that tent.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing is she's just never experienced love in a way that helps her recognize it, because he's like, oh, she goes, do you really want to be doing this here? It seems rather windy. And he's like, my lips must be on yours.
I
and
don't
she
think
goes,
she's
is that a compliment?
Affection is sex is a way to get a baby, not to be intimate with your partner. And when I say intimate, I mean physically connected. Close. I mean close with. I mean like. Yeah, I think
closeness,
sex was a means to an end.
Yes,
and I think that's because that's all she's been ever taught from her mother, is that a marriage is a means to an end to get to your children. But
we see how Penelope reacts to positive feedback or compliments. She assumes you're mocking her.
Yeah, and
here, like when he says, my lips must touch yours or whatever, she goes, is that a compliment? No. She has to ask.
No. It was, he says, you look so windswept. And she says, is that a compliment? In that moment, I was like, are you dense as well? How educated?
No, she just
How did Penelope come out of this family?
But Penelope doesn't understand compliments either. She struggles with them. So it's easy. I mean, none of them, they just grew up in a toxic household.
They're so used to everything being negatively coded.
Yeah. And here you see, and personally, I think the most, and probably because she's always been told she was dumb. So she never really played into giving a crap what people said, mostly. Because I mean, she even said, like, now that Prudence isn't calling me, dumb or answerand or whatever, I'm kind of feeling clever. But I just don't think she bought into all of it, because she didn't have to, because she had no responsibility to the conversation, because everybody played her off as dumb.
Yeah.
So, and she just spent the last 2 years having a man love her. Like, I mean, they sit there and they hold hands on the couch. They might not be doing the full intimate act, but they were being intimate and close with each other. And she was fully, I mean, this man did not enter his wife for almost 2 years.
Yep.
He was waiting for her to want to do it. He was waiting for her to ask, or he didn't know how to do it himself. I mean, who knows? It's Finch. We don't know.
Yeah.
But Norm MacDonald, Lorne MacDonald is a comedian. I don't know if that was coming out.
Old MacDonald had a thumb.
No, Norm MacDonald is from Saturday Night Live. Lorne MacDonald said that, Finch is the king of consent, because he waited almost 2 years for his wife because he believed she was so dumb she didn't even know what it was, I think. He was just letting her come to the realization first. And they're the ones that were the most, not vanilla. he got himself a little, it was almost it. And honestly, that's like foreshadowing because Prudence was in the position that was Penn's first time, and Philippa was in the position that was the makeup time.
Well, yeah, because that's what I was going to say. Like, you've got the complete opposite happening. You've got Prudence, who has Mr. Dankworth on top. She's not having a good time. She is very much like,
yeah, that's
meeting
sex ed.
her. She's meeting her expectation as a wife, but not
Yeah,
not. I would put this
enjoying it.
how Colin writes their first kiss. Like, he could feel her heartbeat had increased, but she was not actively participating in the kiss. Like, same kind of applies here. Like, it takes two bodies to have
Just
sex, but
do
she's
your
not.
business, Dankworth.
It takes two bodies to have sex, but she's not actively participating.
Right. And I see it as like they are sex ed. They're like sex
Yeah.
101. And Philippa and Finch are like kind of Kama Sutra.
Well, Philippa is on top, and she is
Yeah.
definitely having herself a much better time. As is
so's
Mr. Finch. As is Mr. Finch. He's like, yes, I waited so long for this. To be fair, I'm surprised he waited so long. I'm surprised that he even got two strokes in, was not done.
But that's the thing. I think much like what we see in the makeup scene with Colin and Penn is not the first instance of them entering the room because it's light outside.
Yeah.
They've been going all night long.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is just a moment in that whole time. And I think both of these are just moments. I think we're just seeing that Prudence and Dankworth are not very imaginative.
And no, I need to save this part for when we get up to episode 8.
And I think Finch and Philippa, this is probably like, they've probably been going a little bit of time.
We want to talk about Penelope's first time being awkward and too real or whatever, but how is it any different from Philippa and Prudence's? Not that was Prudence's first time, but she's still very new at it, so it's still close enough to, that was what?
Your second time isn't all that much better than your first. It just doesn't hurt.
Well, 2.5. She said we'd started, but I did not enjoy myself. So that 2.5,
I just don't like it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say 2.5. So I mean, realistically,
and I just noticed in the dining room scene when Philippa says we kiss and he makes an odd sound and then he changes his britches. And when Portia says, "What do you and Mr. Finch do?" like right before that. Yeah, because inserts himself where even Prudence, if you look at Prudence's face, she looks over at her like, what are you doing?
I love that look so much.
Like, Portia's is hilarious, but Prudence doing it. Prudence has only had sex one time, and she's like, girl.
And then we cut from the two sisters, and the scene next cuts over to Penelope crying at her desk. Might I say, she's not crying in a carriage, though. She's crying at a desk this time.
But she did cry in the carriage. They caught a glimpse of that, yeah.
I know,
she just kept crying at home.
She knows how to cry elsewhere. And she's writing a Lady Whistledown article.
I'm just gonna ask Nicola, where doesn't Pen cry? That's what I want to know.
The toilet.
Where doesn't Pen cry?
The gravy boat doesn't catch the tears. The Lady Whistledown article reads as, by the light of the moon, it is easy for one to mistake the night as a place of safety, which is why perhaps both Featherington sisters snuck away early last night with their husbands. And then as...
Technically all three, but we've already talked about that before.
Yes, but as it gets into the next line of the Lady Whistledown, the scene then changes over to being Lady Danbury. And it says, but one must never forget that, despite the cover of night, there are still eyes upon us at all times, which is when Lady Danbury receives the letter informing her that they will be having a visitor come and stay, in which, let me just point out for 1 minute. And I was watching this last night, and I am a big Lady Danbury stan, and they did her so dirty. This is the single poorest wig job that I see in all 3 seasons, plus Queen Charlotte.
Yeah, I didn't like her with her hair down.
Worst wig I've ever seen in Bridgerton. Queen Charlotte, anything. It is just straight across. Like, at this point, it is so poorly done that I'm surprised they even took the lacing off the front.
It's like she has hat head. But she wouldn't have hat head because her hair would have been up under the hat.
It makes her head into a box. It is so far back. Like, obviously she doesn't even have hair for them to deal
Well,
with. Like, why does it look so bulky in the back?
and here's what I want to know. This is completely just a neurodivergent thing, and I'm asking the question. So they film mostly in like real estate homes, like
Yeah.
they seek them out and they go, "Oh, this room will be perfect to be this room."
But surely
So
it must
Lady
be, is it
Danbury's
fake
room,
cigarettes? Is that what you're about to ask about?
yes, like she ends up dropping an ash.
I know.
I was like, you know, that person in the
Well,
corner who's got
I'm
to
pretty sure
babysit everything was probably like,
I'm pretty
no, and
sure
dove.
at some point it became illegal to smoke real cigarettes on screen because you were asking actors then to like risk their health. Smoking obviously is incredibly bad for you. So I think at some point it became illegal to smoke real cigarettes. So it must be, I don't know how they do it, but I'm sure it's not. Because I was like,
I mean, could you imagine? It's on a carpet. Like there's
like
a rug there.
yes, people would have smoked in those homes
Because
back in
ever,
those times, but it does degrade your
yeah.
furniture, it discolors
Uh-huh.
everything. Like surely
Well, I
they
mean,
would not allow it.
I'm talking about just this ash because after I saw Regé Jean Page on Graham Norton and he's
Mhm.
talking about how they have like the furniture
Yes.
babysitter
Yeah.
and the room babysitter
That's for
in
the
these
beds.
houses. Yeah. Well, it's like for all the furniture.
Yeah, yeah.
It's to make sure that the room stays the way it's supposed to be. And those rugs are expensive and old.
Yeah.
Like I seriously just imagine, that thing that can't touch the ground or it, blows up or shatters and
Yeah.
they do that slow-mo and somebody's like, no, with their hands out to make sure they catch it before it hits the ground. And that's just what I imagine. Like that poor whatever estate that is babysitter for that room just diving for that ash if it was a real ash. But yeah,
Yeah.
random has nothing to do with the show whatsoever, but it bothers me every time I watch.
I'm there with you. So
Editor, you should have picked a different take. That's except Adjua Ando's probably like so perfection they only had one take.
I know. Oh,
But
Jesus.
we both have different ideas of why this whistle down specific line is said with Danbury there. So I think I would like us to talk about that because I think both are valid, but they're different.
Yeah, I still to this day do not understand. So where the way that they set up Lady Danbury's brother coming into the season, and we will talk about this a little bit more in the next episode where we actually meet him. But immediately when we receive this letter, we are set up as viewers to believe not someone that she wants to be visiting her. She's not happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, we know she doesn't have the best working relation with her family, any of them, including her children, with the exception of obviously the Duke and her grandson Garrett. Gareth. It's because we've got a Garrett in this. We've got a Garrett in this season, but there is a Gareth St. Clair that Tyson marries. My brain this season is just melting.
Oh,
Garrett. But we do know that she doesn't have a great relationship with any of her family, really. So like it is understandable to that she's not happy about it, but it really seems more than just unhappy.
well, and how did that play into the, eyes on you were saying earlier? That's what I want
Well,
to talk about.
yeah, so let me scroll back up.
You said it had to do with him. And my theory is
Yeah, it says,
different.
but one must never forget that despite the cover of night, that there are still eyes upon us at all times. Like, usually the placement of where the Lady Whistledown articles are very pointed. They very specifically put certain
Well,
lines over certain takes in the show to kind of lead us as viewers into where they want our thoughts to be. And we're kind of
yeah,
wondering whether they filmed.
and we were talking about the fools rush to judge, but
Yeah,
the wise watch and wait.
yes. So that was actually the Lady Whistledown article from the start of this episode, but I still think that it applies because it says, "Dearest and actually it starts this time differently. Gentle reader, it is said that fools rush to judge while the wise watch and wait." And then it goes on to talk about debutantes. But I also feel like this line also applies to Lord Anderson because Lady Danbury absolutely judged without getting the full story, which isn't very typical for her. But I also understand that she went through a lot of trauma as a child, and therefore it wires your brain.
And she tied him up in it. She wasn't thinking about how old he was.
No, and so she very much like persecuted her brother for actions of a child, which wasn't fair. So like I think it goes to show the trauma that she suffered, and I think that's why they still had to keep it in. But I do actually suspect that they originally maybe had a different path set for Lord Anderson, and then they saw how him and Ruth Gemmell
their
their
chemistry.
chemistry, and I think that they may have actually changed the storyline after episode 4, because as we said in the last we haven't released this one yet, but the music episode, which will be hopefully released probably on the same day as this one actually, is that they kind of really set us up to believe that he's not a nice person from the lines that they read here, that he is a player and that he is just there to tend to Violet's garden and no else.
He's a
And
rake.
then, yeah.
But if you think about it, though, like Jess Brownell wrote the first episode, and there's literally nothing about a love interest for Violet. And she went into writing this. She wrote the last episode of season 2, and then wrote the first episode of season 3. So you have how pollen ties into each other from the end of season 2 to the beginning of season 3. And then the series goes, but you got to imagine like the timing of the writing and production kind of falls in line because Queen Charlotte came in between season 2 and season 3. So they probably did start writing a love interest kind of thing for Violet. And they probably started it out like, oh, he's going to be a rake and the kids aren't going to like him or whatever. You know what I mean? And then, you know, when they find an actor that actually has really good chemistry with her, like, huh. And then we see like maybe we got to give her something to do. Like Julia Quinn and Shonda Rhimes talked about like Violet deserves a second act. Like this isn't, you know, this is 2024 that we're watching it with the lens of, and most people don't mourn their first husband until the day that they die. I mean, so
yeah, you have met the Greeks.
So it probably, yeah, that whole thing probably. I mean, I probably would. I'm that sentimental, but I'm also the opposite, where it's like the last guy I was with, I don't want to ever get married again. That's the total opposite of pining for a husband that died. But I think that this part of the story was woven in. I think that the Nicola and Luke got the pollen story when they had their initial meeting with Jess Brownell, but I think this storyline got woven in as Queen Charlotte was progressing, and when they knew what Queen Charlotte was going to be, like how Violet was going to play into that. So it probably was a work in progress kind of thing. But my whole thing with Danbury, the fact that it says all eyes are on you and she is the one you're seeing when, because like you said in the one episode when we talked about specifically the kiss, you thought they were going to be witnessed, but he bribed Ray for them to be alone. I think because Danbury is in the shot when this is read, that's kind of an Easter egg about the fact that she suspects Penelope is whistling. That's an Easter egg to us. Just like we have the Easter egg in episode 1 where she veers the queen away from acknowledging her as a potential diamond. Now we have her full on in the shot alone, no one else in the room, except for, you know, her servant waiting to find out what the letter's about. Nosy dude. But I think that that's an Easter egg. Like all eyes are still upon you. And like we were talking about, the fools rush to judge, but the wise watch and wait. I think Danbury is the wise. She watched and she waited to see what was going on. Whereas the Ton, they were the fools that rushed to judge.
Anything that judged, they impartial in. If she is impartial in it, she is wise. When it is too close to her heart, that is where, you know, she maybe becomes a little bit of a fool.
Well, that's how it is with that. The more your heart's involved in something, the more your heart's involved in something, the more your vision is skewed.
Well, and let's talk about someone else's vision who is skewed this episode, because the next scene that plays out is Eloise and Cressida, and Eloise finally gets a very important wake-up call from an unsuspecting kind of place, and I'm really glad. I don't think she actually learned the lesson that she probably needed to from it, but I'm really glad that Cressida did it. But
I think she did.
Even
like she is the one who caused the issue. No, Eloise has always opened her mouth in places she should not open her mouth. And she just assumes nobody's paying attention to her because she in her house, nobody pays attention to her. They dismiss her all the time because she's like the resident feminist.
Because she's on her soapbox again. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Colin, why do you have to be so you?
Yeah. Colin's talking about his travels. Eloise is talking about her not femininity, her feminine strength. Hyacinth is just Hyacinth. Gregory's like, I want to see a balloon. I want to be a balloonist.
Like Bridgerton the musical would be
Oh,
Francesca playing the piano, Eloise up on a soapbox talking about women's rights, and Colin talking about everywhere he's been and why aren't people listening to me? Why am I the only one who's excited about this? And Pen
Gregory
is
is
just
just
sitting
standing
there
there.
like, I love it.
Gregory is just
And
sitting there.
Gregory just falls from
No,
he
no,
just
no.
falls onto the stage from the
No, no, no.
scaffolding.
No, no, no. We need to make this an immersive event. So Gregory's sitting there.
Mm.
We're at the crowd and just what are you just throwing peas at the crowd?
Throwing peas at the crowd, or it's a dinner theater and you have food and he just runs through the audience and steals your dessert. He just
Oh,
picks somebody every show and just steals their
oh,
macaron or whatever. How he's always stealing people's cookies.
oh. That'd be funny actually. So
I would go to that show.
um Eloise is sitting there. Cressida comes and approaches, and the first thing I actually notice is Cressida's very. I don't think that the family has family colors per se, other than bleak. But her and her mother stereotypically dress a lot of pink. What is she wearing in this episode? Almost an exact
Bridgerton blue.
almost an exact shade of Wedgwood blue as what Eloise is wearing. And in a future episodes, I also see her wearing nearly the exact same shade of blue. And I mean, it could be taken one of two ways. It could be that she wants to be more like Eloise, that she's starting to kind of take inspiration from her and think, oh, well, maybe if I'm not going to find a husband, maybe I should learn to be a strong, independent woman like Eloise. Or maybe it could be like Penelope. What do you call it? Where you wish yourself something. My brain.
Manifest.
Thank you. She is manifesting her wardrobe her way into Eloise's heart. She's just
Well,
manifesting herself as a Bridgerton. And because she even
and
says,
that's sort
not
of
all
it
of us
because
have families that are going to protect us. I think she
yeah,
sees all the good.
I think that is, and we know from later, Eloise says, I've had that viper in my home. So
Yeah.
we know Cressida has been invited into the home. We
Yeah.
never see her there except
No.
for the engagement party. And she invited herself, and Colin didn't feel like he could tell her no, which says a lot about Colin. Their kids are just going to get to do whatever they want, especially if he's the stay-at-home dad. He just can't say no to anybody. I'd be like, dude, you were not invited. Bye-bye. But he had an ulterior motive. I know he wanted her to watch Pen be all happy and engagement. But she's been invited in the home. She's been invited over, and I think Cressida is the mirror of Penelope. This is imagine what Cressida would have been like if Cressida would have always been friends with Eloise and always been and somebody. This was not a TikTok or this was a Facebook post I saw in one of the Bridgerton groups. There's an understanding, or there will be hopefully an understanding between Violet and Portia that if Portia would have gotten to marry for love, like their marriage is what made their life and made them who they are and made them have the choices that they have made, right?
Yeah.
That if Violet, because Violet loves her children just as much as Portia loves her children.
Yeah.
But because the circumstances are different is why her choices get to be different. And I think that's the same thing with Pen and Cressida because they both grew up in a very toxic family. And if Penelope did not have the Bridgertons, she would be more like Cressida. And if Cressida had the Bridgertons sooner, she would be more like Penelope.
Hot take. I hope that for storyline's sake, I suspect that maybe Cressida's dad is still going to die so that she can return. And I wonder whether Lady Cowper may end up softening a bit and helping Cressida soften along the way as well without that influence of that negative. The same way that we see it being mirrored in the Featherington house and how negative just breeds negative, which breeds negative. You go into a black hole where no light can get into, can't escape. It's just a negative vortex. I wonder whether we will see that in future.
Well, and I think so, because if Lord Cowper dies, because Lord Cowper is the ultimate grandiose narcissist. Like he's so concerned about the family name. He's so concerned about his standing in society. He's so concerned about what people think of him. And even when his sister comes and she goes, no wonder she turned out the way she did. This house is far too warm. He goes, yeah, that's my wife's doing.
It's a
Like
mortuary.
everything gets blamed on someone else. Nothing is ever his fault. And his wife, as the wife of a narcissist, she's trying to not poke the bear. She's trying to live within his bounds so that she can stay in her comfort zone, which is within society. She doesn't want to be ostracized. She doesn't want to be outcast. And the way she acts is a big reason I thought, like with her name being Araminta, that maybe she didn't know about Sophie and Sophie would have been his because of how he is. And so I think she will soften because she'll be free. She won't have to live within his boundaries anymore to not have him go into a narcissistic rage. And she's doing and this is not a psychology podcast by any means, but when I knew I had to get out was when I was having conversations with my son, trying to train him not to
exhibit the behaviors that he'd seen. Yeah.
No, that like, I was having how your dad is.
Yeah.
You need to do something with yourself to prevent yourself from, you have to learn what to do, what not to do in a situation. So yeah, I'm trying to teach him the coping mechanisms that I grew up with and that I developed in this relationship. And when I took myself outside of myself and looked at myself, like, what are you doing? Why are you training him to develop coping mechanisms to not anger this person when this person should not be getting angry in the first place, because what he's doing is just being his authentic self. And when I realized I was doing that is when I was like, it's time to go.
Should we move our conversation on to our favorite narc of narcs then for our final point of this episode is Mama Portia, the narc be narking in the scene so hard. And you see
she's very narking.
I can almost see that she acknowledge, like there is one moment where she reaches out her hand to Penelope as if to comfort her, and then she's like, oh, we don't do that, and then she puts her hand to her mouth and she's like, oh, and then walks out. Like her motherly
like she thought about comforting her.
Her motherly instincts first told her, you should comfort your daughter, and then she's like, oh, that's gross, let's walk out.
Well, and I think I just don't think that they are a family that they're not supportive. They don't know how to show love or receive love. I don't think Portia thought she comforted her by saying, life unmarried is not so bad.
Well, because the scene kind of is set with the Lady Whistledown article, and then it's almost like Portia is addressing the article directly when this is the part where it starts out. We know there is one young lady who most certainly wishes her plans had remained in the dark, Penelope Featherington, who was so certain that she would not find her husband on her own that she had to enlist the help of Mr. Colin Bridgerton. And while we knew Miss Featherington's marital prospects were slim at best, this recent scandal will certainly make any future hopes disappear. And I reckon the second that Portia read the word scandal, she is like, off to find my daughter. Like, I know that she is probably as low as can be right now, but let's just make her sink a little bit lower.
Well,
this scene hurt me. Like, I got, how you can get secondhand embarrassment? I felt secondhand hurt for the way that Portia makes Penelope feel in this moment. The words that she says to her daughter are so despicable. And this harkens back to one of our previous episodes where we talk about Nicola's weight. Because why is it that her two sisters were on the market as long as she was, if not longer? And yet Portia
was 5 years.
Not in 4. 4 seasons, I thought. It was at the end of her 4th season she got married, before her 5th season.
Well, yeah, this would have been her
4 seasons she was on.
Yeah, she got, and she's between 4 what her would have been her 5th, so 4. Yes.
Penelope's on her
Philippa
3rd.
found Finch her first out, but their courtship lasted almost 2 years.
Yes,
18 months.
Both of her sisters though were on the marriage mart as long as, if not longer than her. And yes, Portia was worried about their marriage prospects, but not to the point of, you don't honestly believe that you would find a husband on your 3rd season out? And she has to enunciate each word just to dive the knife in further. Ugh.
Well, yeah, and it's because for whatever reason, and I personally think projection, I think Portia was Penelope young. I think she was clever and she was smart and she was curvy. I mean, look at her body now. She's pretty curvy.
She's gorgeous, though. Absolutely gorgeous.
She's busty. She's a busty lady. Yeah. So I think that she got to the point where she did get a baron, but I think she got to the point where,
I
she
actually
ended up
wonder.
marrying for
I
security.
don't know when
And
he
the way she
received his
acts
baronship.
later, don't know.
I know it's new.
Well, they moved in across the street
So I
when,
kind of I wonder whether it was actually given to them after they were married.
well, he probably came into it because she knows an
Mm,
awful lot about living in Cornwall.
yeah.
And that's why in my fanfic, I had like the whole Baron's family going down on a ship. And then he
You
becomes
Tarzaned them.
the Baron. I did. I was like, I Titanic them. Because that happens. That's what happens with the Crawleys, like
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Downton Abbey. Well, sort of, because the actual heir, the Lord, is in the house, but every single one, like his two nephews or cousins or whatever they are, who are the next in line, that they already have an agreement with of how the family will be taken care of because it cannot go to the daughters, and he has all daughters. They go down in the Titanic,
Mm.
both of them. So that's why they end up finding Michael, who is just a solicitor. He's a lawyer.
But just the way that she speaks to her makes no sense
And I
whatsoever
almost wonder,
without the context of Nicholas slash Penelope being curvier than her and somehow that being a negative. When Colin's like, "What do you mean
well,
negative?"
also
Like,
her social meter. Her social meter is not the same as her sister's. And but Portia, again, as a narcissistic parent, is never going to hold herself accountable to the ways in which she has created these barriers to entry for society for her daughters, because her vulgarity and her garishness and what she dresses them in all plays into it. Not so much Colin loves yellow, can't tell me anything different, but the not the rest of people, like the way her dresses were cut and all that stuff. The reason Colin found her beautiful because he was connected to her soul.
yes.
And so he was able to look past the awful cut of dress and, the colors. And I mean, he associated yellow with Penelope, and Penelope was his light. And like, so yellow almost becomes like this color doesn't suit you. Like him seeing her in a green dress for the first time was like, whoa. It's probably like the first time a man sees his woman in, lingerie. I said that wrong on purpose, people. Lingerie, like the cute nightie, whatever. And like his dreams of her are always in the night clothes, the flowy robes and nightgowns and stuff. So
Which is
like
funny
for him,
because it's not about it's not about removing clothing. It is about whatever clothing we associate with sex. Because back then, that to him was the epitome of sex. He was imagining her in her night clothes because you hop in your night clothes when you're going to
because
bed
you never
and you have
see a
sex.
lady. Yeah, you never see a lady in anything other than, dress. You would never see a lady in any state
No.
of undress.
We do see Kate in that, like, the prettiest silk undergarments I've ever seen in my entire life. They are phenomenal, and they suit her skin tone so well. But I digress. I don't think Colin's
But
going to
actually,
imagine.
like in season 2, the love, the bane of my existence, wasn't she in a regular old granny white nightgown? Her lingerie was the night
Granny
they
White.
did it. But it was a granny white. It was like, Granny from Little Red Riding Hood.
Can I take that color to my paint sample? Can I please?
I want granny white.
I want Granny White, please. He'd be like, get out of my store.
They'd be like, oh, you mean muslin?
Granny White under things, please. He'd be like, now, do you want those in clean or slightly stained?
Well, and here's the thing, like her granny white nightgown, because of her figure, was completely voluminous and hid everything. And that's why, like, the lingerie, when they get caught outside, is such a big deal, and it's so striking in season 2. But I personally think, like, Colin is dreaming up these flowy, silky nightgowns and flowy, silky robe. And I mean, he basically, like,
oh, I've just put a hole in your plan, but I'll have to think about that some other time.
I'll
talk to you about it after the
I mean, think of the 300 and, like when he walks in that room to get the blanket and he sees her, and I mean, even when she walks out and she's in that nightgown the morning after the wedding, like he's like, gotta go, gotta get out of here. He probably would have just dove over that settee. But honestly, I think if he would have seen her in her granny whites, because she's curvaceous, I mean, she was sexier in her granny white than, I mean, all of the
Mm-hmm.
cleavage showing. Like when
Mm-hmm.
she's sitting in the chair writing her whistle down and she's just in
Yes.
her granny white. I'm telling you, Colin would walk in he'd be like, you are never wearing,
We
I don't
are
even know why I dreamt about that.
we are straight women who are still affected by Nicola and those
Right.
like she like you can appreciate beauty when you see it.
Yeah. And
But
she's like a damn painting. She is. Yeah.
she is the Aphrodite of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, that the commentary from Portia, the way that she made Penelope feel in the season, like in the season, in this entire show.
Well,
Poor.
and
This one
and he,
specifically though was the cruelest I think she was
yeah,
ever to Penelope. This was comparably nearly as cruel as the scene from the
where
books.
Colin walks in.
No, where Colin's trying to propose and she's like
Oh my
she's
God.
Felicity,
Yeah.
Felicity. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is that I think this is the way that they translated this into the show in this even though it's a
Well,
completely different scene, it's still that same aspect of putting your
and
daughter
what's funny
down.
is she's talking all the time about how she's trying to save the family and she's trying to keep the family out of scandal. And, you know, Penelope, how could you be so reckless? Penelope,
Yeah.
how could you? And if you listen
It's
to
all about how it
Penelope,
affects her.
when you listen to Penelope, she's like, I shouldn't have asked a friend, you know, but I shouldn't have asked a suitor.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, you can't even consider him a suitor. There's no suitors for you. How could you even think there are suitors for you? And that's
Yeah.
just Penelope's confidence had gotten to the point where this is now the second time she is recognizing Colin
It is a miracle.
as a suitor.
It is a miracle that this girl has 1 ounce of self-esteem left after what Portia does
Right.
to her. Honestly.
Well, and that's the whole thing. She doesn't. That's why she asks for the kiss, because she has zero left. She believes she's never going to have love. She's never even going to have a husband she despises. She just thinks it's never going to happen. So she just wants one kiss, just one. And I think she becomes, honestly, I think she becomes so embarrassed and she realizes the connection in the moment.
Yeah.
That's what spurs her. Like she's so embarrassed by it and she can't speak about her own feelings, even though she wants to, that she's rambling about her prospects and everything. I think the only reason she got back out there was because she now, as somebody who's kind of like, she wants love and everything, but she's a little avoidant because look at the family she grew up in. I think she got scared and she ran. She's like, I can't be around this man because I will attack him under this tree. I want to just jump on him. And I'm waiting for that day.
They are literally married in episode 8, and she still does not know how to feel purely attached because of what Portia has done. And we will talk about that.
But that's what season 4. I want to see Pen. I want to see Pen attack Colin. No, I want to see, like, everybody talks about how Colin's so feral for Penelope. Penelope's just as bad. She just doesn't.
Was embarrassed, and she's like, I don't want people to know that I'm a wanton for my husband.
Right. But I want to see her be a wanton for. I want her to see her be I want him to walk in the door, her to see the chevron vest, and her to just go up against the wall, Bridgerton. I want it so bad. Like, because that's where we already saw that progression with Prudence, really.
Yes.
Like, where she's warming up to the affection and understanding the affection of her husband. And Colin is just incredibly more passionate and more doting and more like Dankworth to me is kind of like a babbling. Okay. Finch is like a river. Like Philippa's easy, like she's on the lazy river. She's like love is all around, you know. And but Colin's like Niagara Falls. Penelope's down on the Maid of the Mist, just being bombarded with. She's just going to have so much love. She's not even going to know what to do with herself. And I think that it heals her. And like everybody is healed, but we need to see in the happy pollen moments. I want to see her be wanton for her as much as I want to see him be feral. I want to see her be wanton for her husband because that's how we know she's full. Because that is the ultimate. That is the ultimate in confidence. And you know he's gotten her to that point because his love is what's going to get her there. Where she knows that she can just gank his roughly cravat, whatever, his cravat, and just yank him into the room and like, we're doing this now. Let's go.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even in the epilogue when they're at Eloise's wedding or whatever, and she mistakes something he says because he's basically saying he wants to go cause mischief. She thinks he's talking about sex, and she's like, we cannot do that right now. And he literally is like, I know what you're thinking there. That is not what I meant, but I like where your mind is going. How soon can we leave? I would love to see that at a ball so much.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, the masquerade ball is at his house. Granted, there's no bed in
I
his room
hope that
anymore because his bed is at. I mean, well, his bed would have gone back to Bridgerton house because
yeah.
they went to Featherington.
I hope that we still get the I hope we still get the sex scene at the masquerade ball
Because that would have been the stay.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
he would have had to be mad for them to do stay. But I just think it would be. That's how they bump into Benedict and Sophie.
It's them sneaking
because they're married now. They sneak up the stairs.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
They're sneaking up the stairs to go have a little married time, and Benedict has snuck her up there to dance.
I love. Oh, and that is why Penelope is going to recognize her.
Well, Penelope was supposed to be getting danced with.
Yes, but because so none of that can happen now, because she's not going to be a wallflower on the waiting to be danced with anymore. She's not going to be that. Okay. No, we need to save this content.
Oh my gosh,
because we're going to do another part for her,
and that could play.
I know.
I'm so excited, and that could play into.
Put it in voice notes.
That could play. I'm just quick. That could play into how Sophie thinks because it plays into Benedict's new storyline about him being. Because if she's seeing Colin sneak, I mean, she's just going to be like, they're all insatiable. Oh my gosh.
But today, gentle listeners. 2 hours later. Yeah, we were recording yesterday's episode about how Portia goes into the room when Penelope is kind of in her mourning herself stage. I don't know how else to put it. She was very much
her wallow
mourning.
Period.
It is her wallow period. She's having her sad girl summer.
Yeah. If she was Taylor Swift, she'd be writing a song.
Except instead she writes Lady Whistledown, which is basically the same thing. I feel like Penelope kind of uses Lady Whistledown as almost her own personal journal in a way.
After she lost, because I'm rewatching Queen Charlotte, and there's one Lady Whistledown in every episode, which this is the off season, so because it's over the winter, and so you can tell she's having problems getting it out there in the country in the off season. But everything, so I've rewatched 3 episodes, and everything she's written is melancholy and sad, and she's kind of using what the queen is going through to be able to act like she's writing about the queen, but you can tell she's writing about herself, because in season 3 she says, and we were talking about this yesterday, she says, the fools rush to judge, but the wise watch and wait. The wise wait. But in the very first episode of Queen Charlotte, it says, patience is not a virtue, and you don't always get the thing after waiting for it, or something like that. She definitely says patience is not a virtue. And then by the 3rd episode, she's saying, will our queen find that patience is a virtue or a burden, because she's waiting for an heir. But really, through this whole thing, and I was thinking about this, that in the first episode, that's after Pen's both of her breakups, her 2 best friends she's broken up with, and her hopes dashed that Colin would never even consider courting her, and she's in her sad girl era, and she's just no matter how long I wait for that man, I'm never going to get him. And that's kind of what she's writing in that first Whistledown, but she's using the queen as a way to project it out there, so it's still Whistledown and not her. People aren't going to go, oh, I know exactly who this is. And as it goes on, though, and there's a couple of little tinges of light shining in, a couple of little tinges of hope. And I know that's supposed to play along the lines of the story of Queen Charlotte, not so much the current situation, because there's still nobody getting married or anything. And I find it interesting that at the beginning it says this author wants to state that this is a story of fiction based in fact. So we're led to believe that the story of Queen Charlotte, not the current events, not her yelling at her kids marry somebody legitimate and have me an heir already, that is going on, and Lady Whistledown's reporting on it. But the actual story part of young Lady Danbury and young Violet and all of that is supposed to be crafted, in my opinion, by Lady Whistledown, by this author, which we now know to be Pen. So I think Pen is doing something creative to give herself something to do because she doesn't have Eloise and she's not writing letters to Colin. And as the little smidgens of hope come in, I think that's where Colin's letters are arriving.
Well, because he's still writing to her this whole time. She's just not writing
Yeah.
back.
So I don't know if like she's finding things in them. You know how like even after a breakup, and I don't want to say a real boyfriend because he wasn't her boyfriend, they were just friends. She just had a crush on him, but well, she had real feelings for him. I hate that they keep
He
calling it a
broke her
crush.
dreams.
Yeah, he shattered her dreams. Like she had this castle in the air she had completely crafted. And she's trying to be what she believes to be realistic. She's trying to kind of do the Marina thing and get out of the fantasy and just live in reality. But
Yeah.
she keeps getting sucked back into the fantasy a little bit and starts having these little smidgens of hope, and then she almost immediately dashes them within the Whistledown. Like, and of course it's talking about the queen, but it's still knowing what is going on with Pen, because we now have season 3. We can go back and kind of look at that through her lens and see that
Yeah.
she is using Whistledown for a diary. She is using Whistledown to work through her own feeling. Definitely, you know, she is a writer artist in her wallow period. So
all of this to say is that yesterday I kind of rushed through the last 2 parts because we had taken so many side tangents off mic that I thought that we were at 2 hours when we were realistically only at an hour 17. And by the time that I edit out all the little silences and the little mistakes and, you know, the little interruptions, it ends up being less than even an hour. So I thought, okay, let's do justice to the parts that I actually wanted to talk about, which was dig a little bit more into that relationship between Penelope and her mum. And one part that I had put down in my notes at some point in life was the mirror scenes. And I think we discussed it in a much, much earlier episode. And I said, no, we'll talk about that when we get there.
yeah.
Mirrors are important in this season. Very, very important. And Jess Brownell has said, take very special attention to any time. And I took this originally as Colin and Penelope scene whenever they were in front of a mirror. But actually, we get a few instances where other people are sitting in front of mirrors, like Alice specifically. Portia in this scene is standing in front of a mirror, and the parts that she is saying when she is standing in front of the mirror is she asks Penelope, she walks into the room holding the Lady Whistledown article and says, "Oh, Penelope, is this true? Our family has already experienced so much, what's the term? Our family has already endured so much public scrutiny, you know, and she's sitting there and she's throwing this blame on Penelope. How could you be so reckless?" She's standing in front of the mirror when saying this because realistically, it is Portia who is being reckless. It is Portia that has created all this family scrutiny upon her name, you know, with the
looking glass does not lie. It is pointed to the person who has actually been reckless. And that's what I was saying. Like, Penelope actually says, I shouldn't have asked a suitor. And then her mother cuts her off and was like, no, you're unrealistic. Yeah. Again, you know, still kind of pacing. And it's not just that big mirror. It's not just the full length mirror in the corner. She paces over to her little vanity desk and has the little mirror. So her whole speech is really probably something similar that she heard from her own parents and when in her youth. And now that's because that's what she knows. That's how she's parenting Penelope.
Yeah. And she's talking about how unrealistic it is that Penelope would have any prospects on her 3rd season out. And I do wonder whether Portia had gone through multiple seasons herself, but being, as you were talking about yesterday, a little bit more of a curvaceous lady. She's not big by any means. She is not overweight by any means, but she is not rake thin. And I do wonder whether having a more voluptuous figure, because even in Emma, then to the Gwyneth Paltrow version, the friend that she tries to set up, the guys kind of act like she's a little bit dumpy when she's not in the slightest, but she's not rake thin.
Well, and the real issue with her is her dubious parenting, but they probably don't want to out and out say that because Emma is so high in that society and so respected in that society that they're coming up with something that Emma can't smooth over.
Yeah. If Emma is endorsing her and they don't endorse her as well, or not endorse her, but they don't accept that endorsement, then it's like them not accepting Emma. But my point being was that, you know,
well, that was the 90s I do wonder so they probably played her with a rounder actress because that was there was a lot of fat shaming in the 90s, folks. That's when I grew up in my youth then.
That is an
I was a
understatement.
young lady thrust upon the marriage mart,
Have you
sort
seen
of.
all those videos? And I had no idea until I saw them. Like, there's a specific video and it says, why do children from the 90s or raised in the 90s have issues with self-esteem and body image and weight? And it goes through a video and it goes, do you remember this image of Jessica Simpson in the high waist pant with the
Mm-hmm.
leopard print top or cheetah print top or whatever with the multiple belt buckles around her? And
Mm-hmm.
she was dubbed as fat. And I remember picking up a magazine and seeing that on the front cover of look how much weight Jessica Simpson has gained. She's let herself go. Look how
Mm-hmm.
fat she is. She is probably a US 8 in there at most.
Jessica Simpson was vilified. Now, I was 18, starting college. No real dating, and I'm just giving away all my tea. No real dating experience in high school. So my first real relationship was my freshman year of college, and so that's when I was thrust on the marriage mark. People, not that I was so not getting married at 18 years old.
Excuse me, but you go to college just to get married, Patty.
I was still, yes, my mother did that. My mother found her husband on a softball team when she was in, I'm going to say quote unquote college because this was the 60s.
Hmm.
And women went to college to become secretaries or whatever, but really they went to find a
Wives.
husband. And
Yeah.
my,
The new
I
finishing
was,
school.
yeah, I was the first kid in my family to go to college. And, but nobody ever talked about what I would be or what I would do. It
Hmm.
was just cool that I went. And then my mom was like, well, you'll find your husband there and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, what's my major going to be? I'd like to know
Um,
like what path my
Patty,
life is going to be.
women don't have dreams. Women have husbands.
Yeah.
You're confusing yourself.
And that's
But
not
on
that.
the
This was not the 1800s. This was 1994.
this
Just
was
saying.
19, and
But
this is kind of the point that I'm trying to make with Nicola, because when we talk about her weight, we are in no way putting her size, shape, anything down.
no.
We think that she is
Uh huh.
1,654% absolute goddess. What we are
Yes.
saying is it is so refreshing, so nice to see different body shapes, different body types, different heights, different abilities all being represented, different skin tones, different
Mm-hmm.
ethnicities all being represented. But I also think it's really important to acknowledge that,
Yes, not
you know,
not avoid it because that's what happened. They avoided
that's
it. It
where
didn't get
shame
talked
comes
about.
in.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
And I think I understand the idea that Jess Brownell had of it's not about her weight, so we're not going to even mention her weight. The thing is for those of us who grew up remembering Candace Cameron Bure from Full
mhm.
House being told all the time that she was getting too big and had to lose weight, and she was
Well,
not big.
Nicole Richie was the fat girl on The Simple Life. She was
Right,
anorexic with bulimia, and she was the fat girl because she
right.
maybe weighed 5 pounds more than Paris Hilton.
Renee Zellweger gained
Yes,
some weight to be Bridget Jones and was being
yes.
told she's fat throughout that whole movie. And that is
She
my
was
favorite
dumpy.
movie.
She was considered dumpy back then.
I
Again,
would have
she's still
killed for
tiny.
her thighs.
I
I would
know.
have killed for her thighs, and she was being called fat. So,
So,
somebody, myself, who was actually fat, you have no idea what I went through. And a story I
yes.
had on my TikTok, which to make more space, I think this is one of the videos I erased. Literally in my college, in my theater department, having a screen casting director guest teach for a semester.
Hmm.
We had a project we had to do where we did a monologue, and then everybody would write down a screen role, generic screen role we could do, romance lead or femme fatale, or, these are
Hmm.
the female ones, that sort of thing. And most of what I got, of course, was best friend. I got the best friend. One person said romantic lead, and she actually in front of me just vilified whoever this person was because it was all anonymous. You had no idea, saying that they
Hmm.
were working with me so that I could cheat because the more you got, the more versatile you could be as an
Hmm.
actor,
Hmm.
the more chance you had of success. So our grade was based on how the variety of answers we got.
Hmm.
So instead of saying, talking this up in having a belief system that I could play a romantic lead, she
Hmm.
instead openly vilified either somebody was making fun of me, mocking me, or they were in cahoots with me to get me a better grade because
Yeah.
it's virtually impossible for someone of my size to be a romantic lead.
Yeah. Because apparently the size that you are dictates whether or not you deserve love.
Correct.
And that's
And
yeah,
they
that is
and in
why
2024, I agree with you. Weight should not be the sticking point. Weight should not be the question. We have gone through an amazing renaissance of fat,
and I think Nicola is a
curviness being
huge.
sexy. And you know, there's people like Lizzo. Lizzo has always been body positive, and
Mhm.
Megan Trainor body positive. Even
Yes.
Melissa McCarthy, you know, and yet she's had a weight loss journey, but her weight loss journey was health related. It had nothing to do with getting better roles or
I
anything
was
like
going
that.
to say Suki, well, she's my Suki.
Yeah, from Gilmore
Melissa
Girls. Yeah.
McCartney has always had to be a comedy queen because big girls can only be comedy queens. We can be
The
romantic
funny
leads,
best
but
friend.
it has to be in a rom-com. It cannot be in a just rom. It has to be followed by com because if you're fat and you're not funny, you're not attractive.
Yeah. You have to have a coping mechanism, and it's usually
Yep.
sarcasm and sass.
I mean, don't go too on the nose with me there, Patty.
I know, I just called myself out. But and that's where the ball was dropped because Shondaland has this power, creating these female archetypes that are strong, powerful,
Hmm.
resilient,
Hmm.
and they had a real chance here of furthering body positivity and furthering.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, mention it at the table. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's have
Hmm.
one dude, just one dude, Fife, not Cho, Stanton, whatever. Like
I don't
I would
think
have
I would.
not minded a little shove through the wall
I don't
of
think I
Lord
would
Sport.
like it. I would not like it to come from one of the men, but I do think that one of the mums,
Well, the little
probably
hope for success, I think, is the closest we come.
they all talk around it.
Mm-hmm. But what I'm
Portia,
saying,
for how sharp her
for
tongue is,
for
I
Colin
don't
to punch
believe.
somebody in the eye, it would have to be a guy saying it because he can't
Yeah.
punch a lady.
Hmm.
Like if he
He
gets
could
out of that
accident
carriage,
he could
if
accidentally
he
trip over and her face go into the punch bowl.
if he gets
Hmm.
out of that carriage and he's walking in and they're like, truthfully, it's not worth it, blah blah blah. And Stanton, who has literally clocked him since the Danbury Ball and was like, "Oh, are you interested in the fact that Penelope's in there dancing with Debling? Probably the perfect match for her because he doesn't even want a love match. He's not looking for anyone he finds attractive." And then, bam,
They treat
out.
him like an asexual being, yeah.
So because
I just yeah.
he acts like an asexual being.
And I mean, Portia is so sharp-tongued that I do not believe for a second that she would not just flat out say, you are too well read, you are too stone too big, like they do in the book, you know?
Well, and Prudence says it in season 1 that the only reason Penelope doesn't want to come out on society when she is forced to is because she's
Yes.
2 stone bigger than she should be.
Than she ought to be. Yeah. And it's the only time it's ever brought up. And I mean, I don't want them to ever harken on about it, like, but at the same time, it still needs acknowledging because I hate that everyone just talks around it all the time. And this entire conversation that Portia is having with Penelope in the scene is coded with you are fat and therefore you don't deserve a man like Colin Bridgerton or sorry, not anyone. Anyone.
What I really need is somebody on the side to be saying something about her being 2 stone too big or she's pretty in the face but because I got a lot of pretty in the face. Somebody saying she's pretty in the face but and Colin just looking at them like she's a goddess.
And what?
Are you nuts?
And that's the thing. Colin in the books loved her curves. He did not, what was the term he used? Soft in all the places that a woman ought to be.
Ought to be. Yes.
Ought to be. He liked himself a curvaceous lady. He did not want a stick thin lady.
And when she asked him to kiss her and she looked at him and said his name and said, please, she was looking at him in such a way that he was like, she's like a siren. It's like, I cannot say no to her.
This is a woman.
Yeah. Like she was a siren. The sirens in Greek mythology lured the men on the ships to the edges where the rocks were to their death. He is saying she is so beautiful. I don't care if I die. Calling her a siren. It's like she's so beautiful. She's dangerous.
I mean, I'm a straight woman, and I think if I had Penelope looking at me looking like that, being like, please kiss me, I'd be like, okay.
I'd be like, yeah, we need to be at some finishing school so that I can just claim. No, I'm very much a hetero woman, but I don't know. She does have nice lips. I might
She has.
consider.
Oh, that was one other thing that I did not realize. I watched a orthodontist the other day, going through that Nicola has had, she's had, don't you laugh at my tangents? My brain
You
just,
just research. I love your little weird researches. You're so weird, but you're my kind of weird. I've been waiting to be able to say I say that to my son all the time. It's like a form of I love you for me. Like
I
you're
love your
weird, but
weirdness.
you're my kind of weird.
Yeah. That's a Dr. Seuss quote is when you find someone else who's weird, who's compatible with your own, we fall in love, we fall in mutual weirdness and call it love.
Yeah.
So back to the dentist. Hop yourself into the dental chair, please. Recline and relax while I teach you about Nicola's teeth. Transformation. In the last from season 2 to season 3, she's actually had the first 4 to 6 of her teeth done because the orthodontist went through and showed all the incisors have been elongated to what they used to be. She used to have a chip in this tooth and a chip in this tooth, and they're both gone and they've both changed shape. So she used to have two bigger front teeth, and then the two teeth on
Mhm.
either side of her two front teeth were substantially shorter, like probably half the length.
Yeah.
And so it gave her that really cutesy kind of appearance. But in this season,
Yeah,
and I
she had almost a buck tooth look, and I'm not saying that in a bad way
yes,
because
no, it
Claudia
was
Schiffer has
adorable.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and her mouth is almost always slack, like open.
yeah, yeah.
And
People said that in this season they noticed on TikTok, they said, did you not notice or clock that Nicola's actually having trouble keeping her mouth completely shut now with the, what do you call it? Not a plate, dentures put on the first 4 or 6 of her teeth because it
well,
has
and
brought her
I don't
lips forward a
necessarily
little bit
think
more.
it's dentures. I think it's veneers. I think she had
Oh, sorry,
veneers
veneers.
done.
Sorry, veneers. Thank you.
Yeah.
But her lips don't quite naturally fall over them now.
I think it was
Um,
so new before filming started that she
yes.
hadn't figured it out yet.
It takes a good 6 to 8 weeks to get
Well, it's like,
used to that kind of thing.
did you have braces?
I did.
I didn't. I did have a gap though. My mother, those little rubber bands that you would do hairstyles
Yeah.
with, my mom made me put those around my front teeth and the gap did close. Like that's an odd thing that came out of a finishing book from like the 40s.
It does
Seriously.
work.
It does work. I had to wear them for years and years and years after because I had an extra baby tooth in the
Hmm.
front and that's why I had the gap. But my nephew had braces. My best friend's son had braces. I had friends in school that had braces. And when you certain habitual mouth movements that are done, like a friend of mine from high school, she had braces for years. They just kept not, her teeth kept not straightening. And so, like 7 years, she had braces on. So even for probably 2 years after they came off, she did that lip around the braces thing,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
adjusting
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
time. And I would sometimes tap her and be like, you realize they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
They're actually gone. Or like people who have braces on for a long time, they lick their teeth for a long time
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're like something's missing.
Yeah. Well, I had wires up until a year ago. I had wires on the bottom and top of my back teeth because I got adult braces. I got them when I was 23, I think it was
Yeah.
23, 24, or something like that. And so I had wires on the back. But yeah, Nicola's teeth, she's definitely had veneers put on, and it changed the way that her mouth sits. But I mean, she's gorgeous either way. I don't really care what she does. I
Veneers,
don't
I
think
mean,
they
it's
were.
just a lot of people, especially actors and artists and stuff, they have to smile a lot and they want to
Yes.
put their best smile forward. And there's nothing wrong with dental work.
No, there's nothing wrong with any work that, like, if you are going into it, you want to pick me up, you want to feel good about yourself, you
Yeah, whatever makes you feel good about you.
yeah,
Like it makes me
no one
mad.
else.
It makes me
I
mad those
think
people that shame people for getting facelifts and Botox and like if
I
you're doing
think
something that makes
when it
you feel
comes
good about yourself.
when it comes to the level of Joan Rivers where you are under the knife if so often that it becomes a health
Well,
concern,
I
that is
also think that was
different.
I think that is body dysmorphia
Yes,
and
that is
um
that's what I'm saying. That's a concern, but like if you're doing it to feel good and you're not, I don't like when people change the absolute essence of what they look like and can't come back from it. I mean, that's not my preference, but that's still to say that that is absolutely their body. And obviously for transgender, you're changing the essence of what you look like. So at the same time, like there is caveats to what I say, but I think it's nice when people still look like themselves.
Right.
But at the same time,
So
do whatever makes you
ultimately,
feel comfortable.
yeah, ultimately, the theme of this is that love and attraction. I love the fact that these two characters in 2024 were completely a love story of soul being attracted to soul,
Yes.
the essence of a person, loving a person for exactly who they are, not what they look like, not,
Hmm.
regardless of how horrible Colin's temper is, Penelope still
Hmm.
just loved him, regardless of how long he's ever going to hold a grudge against anyone, which Eloise still wins. Well, no, Colin wins because of how long he's had a grudge against Anthony, but in terms of Penelope, Eloise wins.
Well,
And she just loves him through it. It's like, okay,
yeah.
that if that's the ugliest you got, I'm good, you know?
Penelope doesn't love Colin for how he looks. I mean, it's a bonus. And vice versa. Colin doesn't love Penelope for how she looks,
But
but
yeah.
he also
And
finds her attractive.
but the thing is rose-colored glasses are a real thing, and it's not about
Hmm.
making a situation look better necessarily. I think it's like the more you love somebody, the more attractive they are to you, and
Yes.
the more they do, the more their behaviors create a cognitive dissonance to that, and as you start falling out of love, or you start not having those, because sometimes it's just, oh, I forget that there is an actual psychological term for that,
Hmm.
the first butterfly feelings you get and the
Hmm.
attraction, and it's not love. I forget what it's called. It's a big word.
Hmm.
But when a lot of times, like, it's the excitement of the newness that makes you believe they're attractive. But the more you get to know them and the more ugly, like Cressida, she attracts people with her beauty, but she ends up
Yeah.
with no husband because she's got an ugly personality.
Yes.
And, Penelope
Oh,
puts
wait. No,
people
sorry.
off supposedly by her looks, but nobody's willing to say it. But she ends up
Oh,
finding
can
love
we pause
completely
for a second?
based on who she is.
Sorry, we just had a wee bit of a technical difficulty when I realized I wasn't recording
That was
from my
no
end, but
technical difficulty. That was just.
it was a tough difficulty. But I think from what I've taken away from this interaction between Portia and Penelope is more so from Portia's side. I think Portia is massively projecting a lot of the feelings that she potentially had when she was on her marriage mart, feelings that she potentially had around her own body type and body dysmorphia or body image issues. And she has very much projected those onto her daughter and made her feel that, well, if Portia could only ever get a practical match or an advantageous match per se, that is all Portia has ever expected for Penelope because of Portia. And keep in mind, Portia, like Penelope, is actually quite beautiful. We just don't necessarily see it all the time because of her personality, but
Well, and I think
she's actually quite beautiful.
that is one of the, I think, some of the best writing. And I don't know how much of it is the writing from this season or over the course of the whole series that you just can't lose now, that Shonda might have put in herself, or Chris Van Dusen or whatever, because we've talked about it before, how the queen, she navigates these young people on the marriage mart exactly how her courtship went. She was the incomparable. The king said she was
Mm,
incomparable, and she got an advantageous marriage to someone she didn't know that was orchestrated for her, and she fell in love with him and he fell in love with her. So every single time she tries to help Daphne, Edwina,
mhm.
and then Francesca, she tries to orchestrate a match with two people who don't know each other, but it's advantageous for the girl
Yeah.
because she has deemed this girl incomparable, and she believes love of some sort will come. But she also believes that marriage is a duty because that's what was shoved in her face by her brother. And Violet, even though she did all the things she was supposed to do because she grew up in that society and she went through them herself, teaching them how to be on the marriage mart, teaching them how to be in society, teaching them all the rules, teaching them everything they needed to know to catch a husband, pianoforte, learning how to dance, all of it, the right clothing, all of it. She still advocates for them to find a true love match because that's what she had. She didn't need the dance lessons. She didn't need in fact, like when she's having the conversation about society with her father and her mother, her father's love for her is just imminent. It's so evident because his pet names for her are Beauty and Brain.
Mm.
And when her mother says she's too educated, like she's too well read, she's too whatever, she goes, actually, she's like, how's your whatever class she's taking? And she's like, oh, it's fine, but I'd really like advanced mathematics. Like
Yes.
her education was very important to one parent, not so much the other. But she didn't need any of that to catch her husband, who was the next door neighbor, according
Yes.
to the show.
Yeah.
So she wants all of her kids to have true love. And then Danbury's a little bit of both because she married for duty. She was forced into marriage herself and she wanted a love match. She found a love match later with someone she could not be married to, could not have a relationship with. And so she's trying to help people make the right decision for themselves the first time out, not make that first mistake and then have to recover from it or live through it or whatever. And now we have Portia added in the mix of following exactly how she was raised. Even Araminta, we can add Araminta in there. Araminta treats her daughter on the marriage mart almost exactly how her whole courtship probably went, which was barely any kind of courtship, because she's under the thumb of a husband who's years older than she is. Maybe not to the point of Lord Greer, but he's
I
still
think there's a good
incredibly older.
15-20.
Yeah. He's still incredibly older, which means she was not, and she would have been Violet's age, so she probably would have been a contender for Edmund.
Yeah.
Edmund had eyes only for Violet's, and the other ladies that came out around the same time, would have. And Araminta, same thing. Like she was taught women are competition, so she taught that to her daughter. You see all of these adults very much passing on their generational trauma onto their children.
Yeah.
Which is very 2024.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that scene with Penelope and Portia was a whole bunch of trauma dumping, and
we've done a lot of our own trauma dumping during talking about
it. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna splice this little voice clip that we've just made now into the episode, so if it doesn't come out completely seamlessly, because I think it was really important that we go through and actually unpack that interaction just a little bit more, because it really sets the scene for the second half of the season.
Yes, and I just want to say this as a final thought.
Yes.
We did some of our own trauma dumping. We talked about our own experiences, and when you are creating a show and you have a platform like you do with Bridgerton, and you had the chance, like these are the conversations. You can have a show that's fluff. You can have a show that's female gaze, and there's conversation around that. But look at the conversation that this scene generated with two people who now got to probably voice some things we never really had a platform to voice before. Similar shared experience, even though it's two different experiences in two different countries, right? Yes. And this is the power of media. This is the power of art. And that is what we could have had. I think that we could have had this conversation and it could have been forthright and let's have the conversation. Why can't a woman with curves? Why can't a woman with a belly? Why can't a woman with a bubble butt? Why can't a woman with perfect breasts, being in the perfect breast community, be a romance lead? Why?
Yes.
Why?
Like 100%, all of that. Yep. And I think that is why there are so many Holland stands for the season, because let's be real, a size 2 American, let's say size 8 Australian, New Zealand is no longer the standard. There are a lot of women out there, especially mums, who struggle with their weight, who have struggled with their weight realistically their whole lives, and then mumhood just was the slam dunk on it. And
I didn't give birth to a child, but I couldn't because of my
but you
weight
still raised
issues.
a kid. You've still raised children, but it's that societal expectation on women that we have to be mothers, we have to be educated, we have to have careers, we have to still be homemakers, we're shamed if we put our kids in front of TVs, we're shamed if we give our kids anything other than like grain-fed, organic, like everything homegrown. And I mean, let's be real. I am
Hmm.
a little bit of a crunchy mum. I do grow my own fruit and veggies. I'm very much an outdoor play kind of mum, but there is a huge societal expectation. And I think that is why there are so many of us that really resonate with the season, not just for Penelope, but for the message that Eloise is also sharing, that and just the whole entire vibe of the season, of the expectation put on women, put on mothers, put on us having to be everything.
Put on human beings, because Colin has a perfectionist
Yes.
complex.
Yep.
He cannot,
And Will.
he doesn't want to present any version of himself that isn't perfect. And
Yes.
there's a lot of eldest daughters, and um
Hmm.
you know, when you have a specific type of parent that raised you, you end up with this perfectionist complex, and that's the same
Yeah.
thing. This season was such a could have been such a celebration of self acceptance, and it's kind of what it is, because
Yeah.
Penelope has to learn to love herself and forgive herself. But what about
Philippa
everyone
and
else?
Prudence. Yeah.
Yeah, like that wasn't, it wasn't as prevalent to some people, because some people do just look at the words that come out of people's mouths.
Yeah.
They don't dig in, and they don't look at all the nuances, and they don't watch the press tour from start to finish so that they can get all of the actor notes
Yeah.
on what they did with the character.
Yeah.
So there's such a missed opportunity, and in a season where you're going to have a theme of mirrors, guess what, Jess
Hmm.
Brownell? There are so many of us that when we look in the mirror, we see Penelope. When we look in the mirror, we see
Yeah.
Colin, and we wanted to see ourselves in them. And in some ways, it fell short. I think in
Yeah.
some ways it was empowering, and in some ways, a lot of people were like, oh my gosh,
I,
finally,
I
you
think they did
know,
an amazing job, but it just needed to be acknowledged more. I don't like having to read between the lines so much. I mean, she says
for
being on a podcast about reading between the lines.
well, and honestly, because a lot of the conversations we have on the internet as people who do read between the lines and read body language and read facial expressions and look into the theming and look into the, you know, the Eros and Psyche bit of it, or the fact that they bring up Don
Hmm.
Quixote, or you know what the costumes look like, what the coloring means, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
We're seeing things, and somebody who comes from being, you know, a theater major, I was an acting major, and understanding how actors make their choices and listening to the actors talk about their characters and their journeys and how they came up with something and the backstories they came up with, all of that fits in to the story that's being told, because this is storytelling. And it's
Hmm.
not just for all those people out there like the show is just the show. No, there is a story to be told, and every story in human experience either teaches a lesson or helps us see ourselves as humans in a way we hadn't seen before. And while this season did that, it fell short for the voluptuous woman, I feel
Yes.
like.
For today, gentle listeners, we are going to shut our gabs. We will leave it there and continue on next week's episode, where we will finally be getting back to pollen-centric episodes. Episode 3 of season 3. We get to talk about the willow tree, which is probably going to
The
be
dream.
the dream and the willow tree. I'm so excited. I watched the dream scene like 3 times last night, and I know it's so
Mm.
overdone, but I love every minute of it. If you have anything in particular you would like us to cover, or any Bridgerton knowledge you would like to share, please head to our Facebook page, The Ladies Bridgerton. And if you're enjoying our podcast, please remember to click the follow button on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening, because every time that you interact with our podcast in any way, it helps recommend it to others that may love it just as much. Once again, thank you for listening to the musings of two mad women, yours truly, Tash the Kiwi.
And Lady Patty. That